Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me and see my screen fine. We'll start as soon as everyone's here. I am not sure it is actually recording right now. I don't seem to be a co-host, so I can start the record. Is someone recording? Is the host here? Can the host please start the transcription so everyone can understand me more easily with the text as well? Muhammad Safadi, I see you raised your hand, but I don't have host privileges, so I can't unmute or anything.
Hi all. Just give me a minute. I'm also not host now. Just I need 1 minute to correct all or to make sure all the setting is okay.
Okay, please, and enable transcription if possible, so that what I'm saying is also in writing.
Okay, sure.
Hello, Tarek.
Hello, Mr. Hazim. How are you?
Fine. How is everyone? Had a good week?
Good. I want to ask something.
Hello, how are you?
Please do.
Do you like
What did you want to
harissa?
ask? هريسة؟
Oh,
نعم.
yes.
ليس مش الكثير من الهريسة، بس شوي هريسة باهية.
I think it's very hot.
It is hot. You tasted Tunisian harissa?
What?
Did you try Tunisian harissa before?
Yes.
It is hot.
Yes.
Yeah, but it also tastes good. Hot but good.
Yes, it's good.
تمام. لا لسه.
لمين وين حازم؟
أنا أعطيني كوست.
لا خليت الحين لك كوست حازم.
Does everyone see the presentation right now, and as well as the transcription with the subtitles?
Dear Hazem, I think it's
Yes.
okay now. I have
Good.
made you on a host. Till now, the accounts of our accounts are not renewed, so we have to check other colleagues to give us a permission for the session. Hopefully,
I understand.
within this week, hopefully within this week, this issue will be resolved.
Okay, not a problem as long as it works.
Yeah.
We are 38 on the call. Should we wait for the rest of the students, or should we start?
I guess we have to start. They all know that the course starts at 2. So they said, right, yeah, you can start and they will follow the session when they enter the room.
Okay, okay. If everyone is seeing my screen, then let's start.
Yes.
Today we will be starting with React.js on the web. As some of you may have asked yesterday about React Native, it will follow, but only for those who chose the cross-platform mobile specialization. Those will go directly to React Native when we are done with React. But the rest of you who went with the full stack web will not be going through React Native. And instead, you will be going through Node.js and server-side development. So I will, today we'll start on our courses with React.js. I will quickly go through all the chapters that we will see, not only today, but also probably tomorrow and next Saturday we'll also be going through these chapters with React. So we're going to see what React is and why we're learning it, because it's important to know why we learn the stuff we learn. We're going to create a new React project. What we will be doing differently this time is that through this whole course, through the all the chapters, we will be building one project together, where every time we're learning something new, we'll be adding it to the project. But it's going to be one single project that you will be able to access on GitHub, and go see the code and build something similar maybe. We'll start with React class components, not the functional ones. We'll start with classes. We'll write some HTML with JSX. We'll be loading CSS into our component. And we'll look through responsive layout design using React components. Basically, that's where we will stop today. But tomorrow and next Saturday, we'll also be going through HTML events like the clicks and hovers, etc. on React. We'll see how to use bidirectional data binding using the React states. We'll pass data between our components with props. We'll go through all lifecycle methods for every class component. We'll quickly see how to use the fetch API to talk with servers. We'll implement React Router. We'll use prop types for clear and best practices with React. And finally, we'll see functional components and hooks, which are relatively new to React. And we'll also see state management, the old way, maybe using Redux, but also the new library by Facebook called Recoil for atomic state management. And finally, we will be deploying our whole project to Netlify. So we'll go through all this together during the following sessions. So what the lesson plan for today will go, like I said, from what is React and why we learn it, and we'll end today's session with responsive layout design. We'll have a 15-minute break at the center of today's session after we write our first HTML with JSX. So you can take a breather during these 3 hours of lessons. So let's not waste time and start. What is React and why we are learning it? React is a JavaScript library. It is not a framework. Some may call it a framework, but it is not. A framework is actually a collection of libraries. A good way to differentiate maybe a library from a framework is typically a library, if you were to use it in HTML, you could just call it in a script tag. While you can do that with a framework because it's many libraries, you would be needing many script tags. But this distinction is not that important to actually remember. All we need to know is basically React is a tool that helps us build client-side apps or websites that will be run directly on our internet browser, like we have been doing until now with HTML and JavaScript, but this will make things a whole lot easier, especially for data binding, which you will see. We went through data binding together last week, and you've seen that can be a bit complex. We'll see how easier it will become with React, and it allows us also to do a lot of great things more simply. Of course, if we wanted to build a full project with a database, we would also need to write server-side code, which will not be doing for these lessons, so we can focus on our React application. So why React, and what other tools we could be used for the same goal? There are two other major front-end frameworks this time, which are real frameworks and not libraries, who have a similar philosophy to React, which are Angular and Vue.js. Angular especially was very popular between 5 and 10 years ago. But as you can see on the graph on the screen, for the last 5 years, React being the orange line, Angular the blue line, and Vue the green line, Angular has fallen a lot, while React keeps going up and up, reaching lately almost 12 million downloads every week. So every week there are 12 million developers downloading React into their project. That's a lot of React projects, and therefore a lot of opportunities to work on these projects as well. And that is the major reason why we will be learning React. So you can actually contribute to all these new projects and hopefully monetize your skills with React. So what are React's strongest points? What advantages we will be harvesting basically from React? Components, first of all. Components will allow us to structure basically our front end in a simple and clear way. What that means, for example, when you look at a web page, let's take a web page as an example. Let's maybe exit the presentation so we can go look at any website. Let's go to Twitter, for example. If you open Twitter, you'll see a lot of things on the page. Basically, a component will be singular things that are repeated. Let's say here you have this section with who to follow, and you see it's basically the same thing happening again and again. A component is basically putting this in a component, so you don't have to write it multiple times. You write it once, you give it variables, basically the name of the person, their Twitter tag, and a follow button, and their profile picture. All of this is integrated into one component that we can reuse for everyone. Like you can see here, it's the same component that we can reuse, which technically stops us from rewriting a lot of code, and therefore have clean, readable, and easily maintainable code structure. So let's get back to the presentation. That's what components are, and that's the major thing React is doing. A big thing and something that is found only in React is JSX. JSX syntax allows us to write basically something that looks like HTML directly into JavaScript. It's not HTML, but it looks like it. And the advantage of calling it directly into our JavaScript components is that we can use really complex things that we needed to do there before through data binding and DOM manipulation directly into the JavaScript without having to load each HTML element using functions like document.querySelector or things like that. So another thing to know, you don't need to really understand maybe 100%, but it's good to know, is the virtual DOM. So basically, what is the virtual DOM? We've talked about the DOM before. DOM is what basically builds what we see on a page. It's something we can inject to using functions like .innerHTML or document.createElement and document.appendChild. Well, React uses a virtual DOM, which is basically a copy of the DOM. And how that works is that basically we don't manipulate the DOM directly. We manipulate the virtual DOM, and React will see which part of the page it needs to update and only update that part, which makes it really fast. And really and it optimizes as well a lot of memory work and the strain on our browser and computer, basically. So let's get started maybe with creating our first React project and see how it looks. We'll make it simple and use a tool that is called Create React App that we will be using directly on a terminal, as you will see in a few minutes. So I said earlier when we started that we were going to build one project through the whole React course. This project will be called Game On. Basically, what we'll be doing is something that looks similar to the assignment that Mr. Safadi gave you. But we will be basically choosing and buying video games online. We'll add them to our cart. We'll see the total, and we will confirm our order in a separate page. But basically, it will be very similar to what Mr. Safadi gave you as an assignment. I see someone is saying there is no sound. Are you hearing me all right or not?
Yes, we are hearing you.
Everything is good.
Okay, because I see some people saying on WhatsApp that they can't hear me. Okay. All right, so what I was saying is basically we were going to build through all these chapters one project where we can order in video games, add them to a cart, and confirm our order, basically. Very similar to what Mr. Safadi gave me as an assignment, but we'll be doing it with React. So Create React App, I talked about it. So what is it? It's a tool, like I said, that will allow us to create a new React project with no need for configurations. What that means is that we would not need to install or configure tools like Webpack or Babel. They will be pre-configured and hidden. For those of you who maybe don't know what Webpack or Babel is, you can see Webpack into the project that Mr. Safadi sent you on GitHub. You will have a file with Webpack configuration in it. What that does is basically take all your JavaScript and bundle it together in one minimized file. to speed up internet connection, because if your users need to download from a server multiple JavaScript files, it may be slower than one single optimized bundle. And that's what Webpack does according to a configuration you give it. And configuring Webpack can get very complex. So what we're doing is going to use the tool like Create App that handles that for us. It is pre-configured and hidden. So we can focus on the React code and not worry about things like Webpack or Babel. Basically, Babel is for the new, relatively new JavaScript features. At some point, for example, arrow functions are not supported on old internet browsers. We use Babel so that we can use them with any browser, basically, for browser compatibility. The only requirement we have to use Create React Apps is to have Node and NPM installed on our computers, which is something you have seen, I think, with Mr. Safedi anyway, and most of you already have NPM on their machines, preferably the latest long-term support version of it. So what we'll be doing is that we'll get started with showing you how to use Create React App to generate a new project. I'll open a terminal. I'll try to zoom it so you can see better. Okay. On our terminal, what we'll be doing now is, like I said, using Create React App. How that is done is using, you need to make sure that you have NPM, of course. Let's check. Yeah, we have NPM and we have Node. So everything is good. What we'll be doing is using a tool from NPM that is called npx that allows us to run NPM scripts. And what we'll do is we'll do npx create React app and give a name to our project. Let me just go to a better folder, maybe. We'll go to workspace, we'll create a folder called Go Digital. We'll go into Go Digital and we'll do npx create React app, and we'll call it game on React. So what that does is we'll start downloading everything it needs to create a new React application. Let's wait for it to load. Should be done pretty soon. There, it is done. Let's open it in our code editor. All right, let's push this to the side and look at our code editor. We'll see now we have a new project with everything we need. Let's maybe zoom in a bit as well here as well. Okay. Perfect. So it creates for us a React app with all the code that we need. We will not be focusing on its JavaScript right now. Let's look to the package.json. We'll see it has already loaded some things, a few dependencies. Like you might have seen in the project you already made with, okay, Is the font size all right in like this, Mahmoud? Or I think I already made it quite big, I believe. Okay. So like I said, you should have seen a bit of the dependencies going through NPM with Mr. Safedi. Basically, these are the libraries, JavaScript libraries that are used in our project. As you can see here, we have the testing library that we don't have to actually focus on much, but we have 3 main dependencies here that we need that are React, the React DOM, and React scripts. Those are the main 3 required libraries, basically. If we wanted to create a React app without using the tool Create React App that we just used, we would need to add these manually to our project and use them. And we can see also it created a few scripts. You may have seen the build script in the project, and especially the assignment we were doing with Mr. Safedi. Basically, we will use this to build our app but we will not be using it right now because this builds a production version. We'll be using another script to develop, which is the start script, which is really good because we won't have to build every time. What the start script does is that whenever we do something in the code, whenever we change something, it will automatically rebuild our application so we can see the change in our browser. Mohd says we didn't see any code delay. Is there a problem, or is anyone else experiencing that problem?
No, it's clear.
Okay. Maybe there is a problem with your internet, Mohd. Are you at home or are you on site? I don't know. There doesn't seem to be anyone else having this issue, I believe. Okay, so let's try this, basically the start script for now. We'll open our terminal here, directly in here. And what we will do is we'll do npm run start, like we used to do build with the on Mr. Safedi's assignment. So we'll do npm run start, and it should, oh, we're not in game on, and then let's do npm run start. It will basically be starting our server and open a browser for us with our app. There it is. So basically this is our site as it is now. It already created everything. So how does that work exactly? We'll take a quick look at how it works. So let's look what we have in our SRC folder. You'll notice that we have an SRC folder and the public folder. Public will be containing mostly our index.html, which doesn't have much. You will see we have only this, basically. We have a title, direct app, but also most important part is this div, because div with the ID root is going to be used for basically DOM manipulation by React. Everything that React does, it will be injecting inside of this div. Anything is going to be here. How it does that? Basically, we can go here into the index.js and we'll understand. Basically, let's ignore this part for now. You'll see that we have a function called React DOM.render. This will render our app, all of our app. We'll go into details later on when we'll start writing components. The important part is that what it does, React render takes as a second parameter, and the element where it's going to inject. Here we can see it's document.getElementById root. So basically, it will be using this that we have in our HTML. We'll have to write no other HTML file, and we don't have to edit this HTML file neither. All we need to do is keep in mind that this div must not be deleted, or if it is, we must add another one with a different ID and come here and give it the ID that is required, because that's how React actually injects everything into the DOM. Does anyone have any question at this point before we go forward to the next point? It's clear for everyone?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Let's go forward then. And our we didn't see the start, Mohit says. Okay. What you didn't see is how we created this project. Is that what you didn't see, Mohit? Okay. I will do it again for you so you don't miss out. Let me just go back into my terminal. What we did, Mohit, is we went through a folder. What we did is that we looked here to see if we have npm and node installed. As you can see here, we do have node and we do have npm. Then we use a script, an npm script that we can use using npx as long as we have npm installed. And what we do is we do npx create React app, and we give it any name, the name that we want, example project, for example. And that is it. What it does is it will start loading. It will create the project for us and do all necessary configuration for us. And we can directly start looking at the code. And that's how we created the project that you can see here in the code. And that when we build gives us basically this. Is that what you missed, Mohd? Is that clear for you now? Good. So let's move forward with the presentation then. So React class components, what are they? So basically in React, like we say, we talked about components earlier. Everything in React is a component, like literally everything. And there are different ways to declare components in React, basically two ways. We have classes and we have functions. And at this stage, we will be using classes, mainly because classes allow for more features as of now. They've been here for longer in React, since basically there was function components, but function components really became good when they added in hooks. And that is relatively new, as it's, if I'm not mistaken, something that was added into React last year. And React already existed for many years, and the main way to use classes, to use components, was classes. So that's what we use, what we will use at this stage, even though we will learn functional components and hooks later in the course. So how we define a React component as a class? Basically, we need only two things. We only need two conditions to have a React component as a class. We need to declare a class, give it a name. As you can see in the example, we created a class called welcome. First condition is it needs to extend another class that is called the React.component. You can see how it's done in the example that is on screen. Well, maybe I'll make the screen bigger, I'm sorry. So as you can see in the example, we need to extend a class called React.component. that is the #1 condition. And every React component as a class needs to have a function called render that returns JSX, basically, or null. These are two of the things we need. Extending React to component class and have a function called render that returns JSX or null. So let's try to make our own component as a class. Okay. So we'll come here in our SRC, we'll be creating a new folder that we'll call components. And we'll create a new file that we will call my component, or let's call it actually hello.js. And this will be our component that is called hello. What I mean by let's first thing that we need to do is we need to import React into the file. We'll do that in the ES6 way, basically the version of JavaScript that is that came out after 2015. So we'll do import React from React. Now we have React in our the scope of this file. And what we'll do, like we said, we're going to declare a class that is called hello. First condition, like we said, it needs to extend React.component, right? And it needs to include a render function that returns JSX or null. We're going to return null as we'll be learning JSX later. Not really later, but that's the next step. What we can do, and then we can do anything actually with this component. We can say, for example, here, I want, when this component is loaded, I want, before we return, I mean, before returning, I can do anything. So basically every time this component renders, I want to write to the console, hello, go digital students. Now that we've written basically component, we need to export it so we can use it elsewhere. So let's export it. Export default hello. And we're ready. Basically, our component is ready. All we need to do now is to call it in our app. Basically, what we need, what we look here, if we look at the console, let me zoom on the console and put it to the side, dock to the right. I hope the font is big enough. You'll see that I don't have the console.log I have on my component here. So how we'll do is that you'll see that even here it says edit app.js. Why? We've seen when we were going through the index here, so when I explained how it injected everything in the div ID, we explained the second parameter of this function called react_dom.render. The first parameter is the parent component. In every React app, you have one component that is the biggest parent. So anything in the React actually can be represented as a tree where you have components and other components as their children and other components as their children, basically like HTML in a sense as well, where you have the biggest parent is the HTML tag, then you have a child that is the body tag, then another child that can be an H1 tag, etc. So the biggest parent tag in React, we usually call it app. And this is our main component, main biggest parent component. So anything we need to do, we need to start editing our app component. So we created a component called hello. How to use it? So we need to add it to this parent that is app. So we go to app.js. And here you can see app is a functional component. Let's not put a lot of thought into that, and just see how we can import our hello here. Let's make this into a class component, so it's better easier to understand for you guys. We'll have a class, we'll say it extends react.component, and here, instead of directly returning, what we'll do is that we create a function called render, and we return our JSX. Like I said earlier, JSX looks like exactly like HTML, almost, with a few differences that we will go through shortly. But here, what we need to know is that basically, if we want to call our component, we need first to import it. We'll come here, import hello, which is the component we've just written. And we need to say from where we need to get it. So from point, we put it in a folder called components. So we're going to go components/hello, which is where our file for the component is. And then all we need to do to call it is basically come into this JSX and add it like we were adding an HTML tag. Basically, any component in React is basically an HTML tag you're used to. Basically, it's as if we were creating our own HTML tags in a sense. And that's how JSX works. So we created this, and it's called hello. We can call it like this, or we can call it like this, like in HTML. And this is hello. So now let's save our app. You'll see that we have an error here. It says React is not defined, which it's right, because we didn't import it here. So we need to import React like we did on our hello, and we'll say import.react. So now there are no errors, and our app has been updated. We can go back to the browser. Here we go. And let's refresh our page. And now you can see we have the console.log, hello, Go Digital Students, and we see it comes from hello.js. So our component is being loaded within our app, basically, within our website. And that is how we create a component using classes. Does anyone have a question up to this point before we go forward and start writing JSX? No questions? Anyone? It's really important that you guys, everyone understands this part clearly, as we will be increasing complexity more and more as we go on. So it's really important that everything is clear for everyone at this point where it's still easy. Keep in mind that even though I'm teaching in English, you are free to ask your questions in Arabic as well. Mohd, good question. Yes, you do have to do this for every component you create. Either do this or do it with functional components that we will see later in the course. Everything needs to be a component. And yes, so components can be either a class or a function. We'll start with classes. Functions are easier to declare, but we'll see them later. Okay, if it's clear for everyone, let's start writing our app. We said we were writing an app for basically buying video games. So let's write the necessary components for that. Let's go back to our code and basically let me go here, writing HTML JSX. Let's understand a bit more about JSX before going back to the code, excuse me. So JSX can be put into constants. So basically, for example, in this example, you can see on the screen, we can have a constant or variable called myElement, which takes something that looks like an HTML, but as you can see, it's neither a string nor HTML. If you tried writing HTML in JavaScript before without React, you might have noticed it just doesn't work. What you need to do is write the HTML in a string, basically in a chain of characters, and then you need to use that inner HTML to inject it wherever you want it to go, or simply do a document.create element like we've seen in our previous course about DOM manipulation. But in the preceding expression, there is no string here. We're not in HTML since we're in JavaScript. So that is what we call JavaScript, GSX, and it's basically an extension of JavaScript. It's JavaScript that was extended with the ability to parse HTML-like syntax. It's not really HTML, but it definitely looks exactly like it. So what that means is that when using React, we will have no need for neither document.create element or inner HTML to manipulate our DOM. We will be using GSX directly to manipulate the DOM however we see fit, basically. And that's what we will see when we start creating our UI right now. So let's get back to our code here. Oops. Let's get back here. So what we will be doing first is clearing what we don't need. We really don't need app.test for now. And React logo neither. We won't be needing that. Let's delete it. App.css as well. We have no need for it. Let's delete it. And now let's go into app and remove the things that we don't need that were used to render the React logo. So all we will keep is a div with the ID app and basically our hello here. That's all that we will keep. Now we should be getting an empty page. If we refresh, we should be getting an empty page and our Hello Go Digital Students in the console. Okay. So going forward, what we'll need to do, we'll need to create some sort of HTML to display. Let's start by displaying a game. Let's say, let's create a new component that we will call game card, which is going to be basically like the card you had for products in the assignment with Mr. Safedi. Let's do the same thing that we agreed on earlier. Let's import React from React. Let's start a new class component called game card and extend React.component. As usual, we need our render function that was going to return null for now. Okay. And we'll go into our app and import. Let's add a console.log here so we know it's loaded. .log game card is loaded. And of course, we'll need to export it here, otherwise it doesn't work. And go back to our app and do the same as we did with hello, but import our game card and call it here as well. Let's call it in the other way so you can see both ways. We don't have to have it open like that. So now if we go back to here, we'll see our game card is indeed loaded. So let's get started. So here, let's actually call this game cards because we will be displaying many of them. I'm sorry. Let's change the name quickly. Game cards. Okay. And rename this as game cards. Okay, game card is loaded, everything is fine. Let's go back here and let's say we have basically a game card. Let's call this game data. And let's say we have data here. I'm sorry, let's say this. Let's take it inside the render. Game data. And let's say we have every game data, we have the name. For example, let's take anything. Let's take, for example, the Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. And let's add the genre, action RPG. Let's take year where it was created. It was created in 1997. And developer is going to be Nintendo. Say now we want to display this data. We'll see that we can directly do it with no inner HTML or anything directly in our JSX. How we will do that is we'll create a div at first. We'll give it an ID, say it's basically game cards. We always need one parent div. We can't have divs next to each other in JSX. And now we'll start by saying we'll have an individual div called with a class. You'll see the first difference with from JSX and HTML. Usually in HTML, you write class, right? In HTML. In JavaScript, you don't write class, you need to write class name. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So it needs to be class name. So Hussein asks, React is a library to import. Yes, React is a library to import that needs to be imported in files so we can use extends react.component. Another way to do this is that we could call component directly here and have it like this. This works as well. But yeah, we need to import React library every time. And
Mr. Hazem,
yes,
every component you should import React.
React needs to be in the scope for the file to understand what JSX means, because JSX is not something that exists in JavaScript. So if you don't import React, the browser doesn't know what to do with the JSX you're writing. But in latest versions of React, basically, if I'm not mistaken, version 17 and forward, for function components only, you can not import it, but only with latest versions of React. But basically, you don't need to import it because React is importing it for you without you knowing. But React needs to be in the scope of the file, so the browser's JavaScript engine understands JSX. Can you write HTML in normal JavaScript usually without React?
In last version, you don't need add React.
Yeah. In the last version, you don't need for function components only.
Okay.
Because React does it for you in the background without you seeing it. It imports it anyway. But you don't have to do it yourself.
Okay, thank you.
But as a best practice, let's import it anyway, so you can understand, because it needs to be in the scope, like I said, to understand JSX.
You mean it's imported implicitly?
Yes, it's imported implicitly in the latest versions. But if you use, for example, React 16, it needs always to be explicitly imported like we did earlier. Otherwise, JSX will return an error.
Which version you recommend to use? 16 or
Always-
above?
I always recommend the latest version, so you get the latest updates in terms of security and the latest features, because they always add new things, and it's always interesting to learn and use the new things.
Okay.
And
Please, how to track updates of React?
of course, if you go here on the package.json, you'll see automatically when I use create React app, it always uses the latest version. But how you can track updates is that you can go on, since React is actually, you can go on NPM, you can go to NPM React, write it on Google, and you will come to, first result will be the page of React on NPM. And you can come here and see the latest version. See, it gives you the latest version, the weekly downloads, and when was the last published to their GitHub, basically. When you want to see if you're, if you have a library you are using, especially React, is up to date, you just need to go to the NPM page and see if there is any new versions. Does that answer your question, Hussein?
Yes. Okay, thanks.
You're very welcome. Okay, so let's keep going with our JSX. Like I said, React needs to be in the scope to understand JSX, because without React, try writing JSX in JavaScript. Try writing this without putting in a string, without putting it in a string like this, or like this rather. This will not work in normal JavaScript without React. It will return an error. So that's why React needs to be in the scope, so it can use actually this JSX syntax. So we created a game here, data, and we want to display it. We're going to add to that class name. Let's call it gcard. And here we're going to have h2 class name. We're going to say it's title. And what we need to do is basically just, when you want to inject any data in JSX, you need to open these accolades. You need to open accolades this, you need to open this, and then you can write whatever you want in it. Go get data.name. And go here, add another one, it's h4, and have genre. Have another one for year, another one for developer. John, title, subtitle. And go here like this, call this the year, and this the developer. And basically, as you can see, that's all we need to inject data into the DOM. No need for inner HTML. No need for create element. No need for anything. It's all in JavaScript. So everything is accessible whenever you are and wherever you want. So let's see how it looks. We created this. Let's go to our browser and see how that looks. So yeah, The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, and we have Action RPG, 1997, and we have Nintendo. So everything is good. What we want to do now is maybe put it in card and add title here. Maybe do title, so you can know what everything is.
Mr. Hazem.
Yes?
I'd like to ask a question.
Please do.
How to get the key of the variable genre year developer? If I want to name the class name with
Yes.
the key of the variable, how to get it?
You can get, you want to get data from a class. For example, you want to get here the game data developer from game cards. You want to get it here.
For example, name.
Yes.
How to get the key of the name?
you named it, so you go game data dot name.
The key name, genre, year, developer. How to get it in React or JavaScript? I would like to name the class name of each element with the key and the variable game data.
I don't understand. You want to read the game data from the class
I want
directly
to
from
see
the class?
the keys of the constant game data.
Oh,
How
you
to
can
get
go. You can do object dot keys of game data.
Uh-huh.
And what that will do, actually, let's do it. If I do console.log and go here, and I'll say keys for Hossein. And let's go back to our HTML, and you'll see keys for Hossein has an array with all the keys. Is that does that answer your question?
Yeah. تمام.
كيف يا حسين؟
Okay.
We can do the same for values as well. We can have values here. We can have values for Hossein as well with object.values. And you'll see here we have keys with name, genre, year, and values with an array with the years only. This is the keys, and these are the values. Another way as well, which is good, that we use
Thanks,
in our
Mr.
last.
Hazem.
You're very welcome. There is another way that is interesting that we use in our last course, which is the entries. I love this feature of object because what it does, it gives us both. What it does, it gives us an array of arrays, as you can see here. Every array has arrays inside with the key and the value every time. That is also very useful to have. All right. Now let's say what we want to do is that we have one game here, but what if we want to have many, right? What if we want to have a list of games, because that's what we need. So let's do games data and go here and add another one. Let's add another game. Let's call it what? Let's call it okay, let's call it Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim. There's an action RPG as well. It was made in 1911 and it was made by Bethesda. Now what? How do we display this time? Well, how we display this is basically what we will do is that we will create games data JSX, and we'll go map games data, and for every game data we will return this. We'll get rid of this here, and what that will do is that we will return in the JSX an array of these. If we look at it, let's take a look. Console.log games data JSX. Let's see how it looks. Let's clear our console, and what you can see here is that we have an array. Our games data JSX is an array, and every item in the array is basically a React element. We're going to have a React elements here, not components, elements. So basically a React element is a JSX combination, basically, or symbol. So now that we have an array of React elements, we can easily integrate it in our final return. You just have to come here and give it the array of elements, and it will understand it alone perfectly. If we go back, we'll see now we have both our video games. And if we go and inspect the HTML to look how the HTML looks, we'll see it did just that. We have now two G cards like this. And every G card has, again, the same element. So that allows us not to have to rewrite it every time. So we write the code once and just once, and it works perfectly. Now for best practices. For best practices, what we do is that when we do this method of creating an array of React elements, we need to give it a key, basically. We need to give it a key. We give it here a property in the parent, and the key can be anything that is unique. Here, we won't have two games with the same name, I guess. So we can say the key here is the game data.name. React needs it to optimize its rendering. You don't need to do it. As you see, it worked without it. But for React to be faster and more efficient, especially if you want to change the order in the array, you want to show one before the other and change the order at render time, it is important for optimization reasons to have the key property. And it needs to be unique for every item in the array. Ideally, it should be an ID, but since we don't have an ID here, I mean, we could add an ID technically. We could add an ID here and say this ID is 1, and this one's ID is 2, for example. And then we can say the key here is the ID, for example. That's the best way to handle this, having an ID. So that's for best practices in React. Another thing we can do is basically when you write React, we want our files to be the smaller possible. How we'll do that is we will turn game cards actually, instead of one file, we'll create a folder called game cards for our components. Let's put every component in its own folder. That's the best practice. Again, this works, but we will see how to best architecture our app. Let's take game cards as a folder. We'll put game cards inside the folder. We'll move it. And no, let's not change the imports because we're going to rename this into index.js. Now, what is cool about calling this index.js is that when we call it in the app, now we don't have to add index. We could add index. I mean, if we add index, it works, just works. But when the file is called index, you can actually not write it at all, and it takes it by default. Game cards, yeah, it should take it. Index.js, it should be taking it relatively. So in the directory, components, game cards, slash, maybe? Yeah. If we do this, it should work fine. Now we don't have to write index already. Okay. So now that we have this, why did we put it in its own folder? Because I want to create a new file called data.json. And that's something that is interesting because as a best practice, you want to have the least code possible in one file. We want to have ideally, yes. Yes, Abu Hamda.
I'm sorry for pausing.
I'm sorry, there is a lot of echo in your microphone. What is the issue? What is your question?
I'm sorry, Mr. Hazan, but
What is it? I can't seem to hear you, Ramez Abu Hamda. Can you write the question for me, please, in the chat, maybe?
Use this.
I'll wait for you to write it. You don't have to be sorry. It's okay. Yes, please. I love questions. Go ahead. Take your time. Can we write a CSS code in React 5? That is an excellent question. Unfortunately, I'm not going to answer it right now because we are going to do it a bit later in today's course. We're going to do it together. We're going to write CSS code in a React file, and we're going to write it in its own file as well. So I suggest you stay focused with us, and we will do it together just a bit later. Is that okay with you, Muhammad, or do you prefer I still do it now and do it again later? But the answer to your question is yes, we can actually. And you will see how together. We'll be going into CSS a bit. We're going to be going to in CSS quite deeply today because we're going to see in responsive design as well for our components, which is going to be interesting. So stay tuned in and we'll do CSS. So where were we? As I said, so basically in terms of best practices, if you want to have the cleaner code, some of you asked me questions about how can my code be the cleaner possible. Well, in terms of cleanness in React, the shorter the code per file, the better. We want our files to be single responsibility. We want every file to do one thing. So a good way here to reduce the length of our code in the component we've written is basically get rid of this data here, especially if you want to add more games. This is going to become very long. So what I suggest is getting rid of it altogether and put it in a separate JSON here. In a JSON where we are going to, this needs to be like this in JSON. So let's do just that. There we go. What is the issue? Oh yeah, and this needs to be an array. I'm sorry. So there we go. This is our JSON. And then we can call our data here. We do import games data. And this is something really cool that Create React app does for us, is it adds a JSON parser implicitly. We don't see it, but it works. If we import games data from data.json, it will read the JSON and turn it into an object. And basically it will keep on working. You see, we don't have the data here anymore, but everything works fine on our app. And that allows us to have a shorter component in this case. So we don't have to worry a lot about basically our data. We can go even further and add a file here called utility.js, which is not going to have any anything. So we can go, we just need to import React from React to have it explicitly in our file. So we can write GSX and we can take this whole function in the map and you can call it render game element. And then we can, in utility here, add a new export constant render render game element, and it's going to take what is it going to take? It's going to take. We're going to make it an arrow function. Oh, excuse me. So this is useless. So we can have this separately here, so we don't waste space in our component with it. In our component, we can also import. Then we import render game element, and we're going to take it from utility.js. Muhammad Bujahid asks, are we going to use libraries for React UI, for example, Material UI? At this stage, no, because I want you to understand CSS and the basics. So we're going to write everything ourselves. If it's something that interests you, we can do it late in the course. But at this stage, I feel everyone needs to understand components and how to use CSS first before we add a library that does it for us. Otherwise, no one is going to be able to learn to do it themselves. But yeah, if it's something that interests you, we can definitely add it in the last course as a way, as an interesting library. Basically, we can take a look at interesting libraries. We can take a look at Material UI. We can take a look at some library that is really interesting, that is called Native Base, that basically allows us to have the same UI library for React and later for React Native as well, without changing libraries. We can, if you want, if it's something that interests you, we can add a quick chapter where we go through interesting React libraries for UI or otherwise. Is that something you would be interested in to add later in the course? Okay, we can definitely add that later in the course. Actually, I'm going to do it right now. Let's say here, before we're building, let's take a look at interesting React community libraries. For now, we'll just keep it to everything official. We're not going to look much into the community. We're going to learn how to do everything ourselves. But yeah, definitely, at the end of the course, we'll take a look at some libraries that were made by the community that makes our lives easier. So yeah, let's keep going with the function we were creating. So here we need to render game element, and we need to save this, and it should work. For those for whom it's not clear why here we're using between brackets, here we're using between brackets, and sometimes we use brackets, and sometimes we don't. For example, in app here, we don't use this. We use it without the accolades, I'm sorry. It is because in here, as you can see, the difference here, we're doing export default. So we can have only one default export per file. And the default export, when we call it, we don't need to use the accolades. But in here, in utility, we don't use defaults. We do use export directly. And as such, we need to use accolades. Otherwise, what we can do is we can also do it like this. We can have game card utilities. We can name it however we want. And then this will need to be game cards dot render game element. But it's easier to do it like this, and it's clear. Tariq says, anatomy skeleton. What do you mean by anatomy skeleton?
Everything is divided.
Well, everything is divided. Well, what is divided? Oh, you're talking about components?
Yes.
Yes, like I said earlier, it's like a tree. You need to imagine it like a tree. Every component has a parent and children. So
Yes.
that's how you should see the anatomy, actually. And here, the biggest parent is the app. This is the biggest component. And here, as you can see, it has two children.
This
It has
is
the hello.
root. This is root.
Yes, this is the root of our tree. The top component parent. This is the root. And it has two children, the hello component and the game cards component that we both have written ourselves. And we can go into game cards, but excuse me, for example, and add another component under game card, which will be a child of game card in this sense, in this situation. So basically, parent, child, parent, child. For example, you can, I don't know, we can add, for example, hello can no longer be an app. We can get rid of hello here. And we can go into game card and add it there. We can go here and we can import hello from components. No, we're already in components. And hello. And we can call hello here. No issues. And it will still work perfectly fine. If we look at the console here, we'll see that hello is still working. See, hello, Go Digital Students. So basically now in terms of anatomy, app is the biggest parent. Then we have game cards, and game cards has a child, which is hello. So that's how it would go. And as you said, app will be the root. Basically, it will be this. This is the app. You'll find app under it, and then you'll find game cards under it, etc. A good way to basically see this anatomy is use an extension to your browser. I'm going to exit Firefox and use Chrome because I already have it. You can go to, for example, Chrome and download React Devtools. You'll find this extension here. It's an extension you can install into Chrome. And what that does, or any browser, you can find it on Firefox as well. You can find it under Firefox, Microsoft Edge, whatever it is the browser that you use, you should be able to find it. What that does, excuse me, is when we go back to our app here on the localhost, if we go to our console here, and then let me zoom a bit, you'll have a new tab called components. And if you go to components, you can see actually the tree and the anatomy skeleton you talked about, Tarek. See?
Okay. Good.
You can actually see the tree here. And if I put hello, you can put hello at both places. Actually, I can come here, call hello here as well. And have hello. Let's call it in the other manner so you can see both methods. Excuse me. And now if you can see in the anatomy, we have two hello, 2 times in the skeleton, once under game cards and once directly under app. So that's the anatomy skeleton of React. And you can see it really easily if you download the extension of React Devtools. Okay. You can even see where it's called, actually. You can see rendered by game cards. You can see it here as well. So before going to the on break and then starting the next chapters, what I'd like to show you is some things that are a bit different from basically what we are used to on HTML. I'd like to see with you a form, if you don't mind. Let's add a component here and call it game form. And we'll come back to it a bit later in the course. But I want you to see how some things are different. If we go into game form, let's call it under app actually, let's call it here. Let's go game form. We can call it here. Import React from React. And you can have class game form extends selected component, and you have the render. And we can return a form, the ID of game form. You will notice something that when we submit, it's no longer like written like this. Well, let's call it handle submit. Excuse me, this is handle submit. Oh, we don't need anything. Handle submit event. Let's not use another function. Or use another function. Handle submit will let's try it out. Console.log submitting form and console.log the event. And let's add a button here with type submit. And export default our game form. So let's go back here. We should be, okay, my bad. I should add something. Submit new game. Okay. Now we have a button here. And if I go on info and let's clear the console and click on submit new game, you see it doesn't work as expected. It just refreshes the page. And that doesn't work like I want it to work. So how you do it is basically this should not be on submit. It should be like React does it, on submit with a capital S. That's one of the minor differences you can find between HTML and JSX. Another example is if we had an input we had, for example, label for game name and title label. And if we had an input here with the ID game name and what that does is that will return an error as well, saying invalid DOM property for. Did you mean HTML4? And will say expected unsubmit listener to be a function, instead got a value of string type. So what that means is those are two, you see three errors actually. The unsubmit, did you mean unsubmit with the S capital S? The HTML4 and unsubmit. These are three differences in term between JSX and HTML. And you'll see in HTML, this is valid, but in JSX, we need to write unsubmit with a capital S. It doesn't take the name of the function as a string like we do in HTML. What it does, it needs a full function. So we need to use this dot handle submit, basically this function. And for doesn't work neither. We need HTML4. Now you'll see the errors will disappear. If we refresh, the errors will not come. And if I write submit new game, well, oh, we forgot something. We need here event.prevent default, so it doesn't refresh the page. And if we go like this, you'll see we're submitting form event, and now it works. And we get, so basically everything we need, the inputs and everything. Elements, the form, whatever we want, the event listeners, everything. So this is one of the minor differences between JSX and HTML. Actually, that's true for all events. On click as well, if we were to add on click here, we must not click use it like this. We must not use it like this and the string function. This is wrong. We need to write on click with C, capital C, and not a string. We need to open accolades and give it a function, handle click, for example. So these are one of the differences between HTML and JSX that you need to keep in mind, especially when you're writing form, but we'll come more into detail with this later in the course. So does anyone have a question up to this point before we go on a short break? Let me get rid of this for now. Is everything clear up to now? No one has any questions? For no misunderstanding, we'll React in general, not native or JS now. For now, we learn React in general, yes. So we'll start with JS to explain the fundamentals of React so that everyone understands what React is, and then can build on it another layer of skill, which is React Native. Because React Native is basically React with added things. So now we're learning the basics of React, using React.js for it. All right. Anyone else wants to ask a question or need something clarified, maybe? Good. Seems that everything, I hope everything is clear for everyone and no one actually doesn't want to ask their question, but again, okay, with practice, it will be okay. Keep in mind that you can actually, if you don't want to use English in the question, if you have difficulties, you can ask in Arabic and I'll try and understand and answer you either in Arabic or in English, but you can express yourself however you want. So yes, as Tarek said, time for a 15-minute break, as I know 3 hours is a lot. I heard your feedback. So yeah, break, out of focus. True, Tarek. So yeah, let's take 15 minutes and meet back at 3:50 Gaza time. So in 15 minutes, is that okay?
Okay, nice.
Okay. So let's meet back in 15 minutes, everyone. Rest up, drink some water, and let's get back into it. Hello again. We can resume as soon as everyone is back from break. Please tell me if you guys are here already. Okay, it seems that some of you are here, but not everyone. So we'll wait maybe. Okay, people are getting back. So let's get back on track, shall we? All right. Next up, what we have is how to load CSS into our components to answer a previous question about CSS, if I'm not mistaken. Let me remember how asked. Who asked about the CSS question earlier? I forgot. All right. Okay, so next up, we'll be using CSS. We'll see different ways to load CSS into our React components. And we'll get started with that right about now. So let's get to it. So there are basically two ways for us to add styling to our application and basically our components. And that is going to be either through inline style, which is basically going to be a CSS-like JavaScript object that we're going to write directly in the JavaScript to answer the question that was said earlier. If I remember correctly, it was Abu Hamda who asked, or was it someone else? I'm not sure. But basically, to answer this question, so basically this first method is going to be writing CSS directly in JavaScript. And that has its own advantages. But we're also going to write CSS file like we used to do when we were using regular HTML without JSX and without React. Okay, so let's see how that can be done in both ways. Let's jump to our code. Let's get back to our code. So basically how we're going to do first is we're going to try and customize our game cards. So we can see our game cards here. They don't look very pretty or anything like that. So we'll try and get some CSS going there. So first method is going to be inline. Let's close everything and keep just this file. So it's clear. We can add CSS like here. For example, we can add anywhere we want a sort of a style. Let's say here we have style, for example. Style. And it's going to be an object. Style or no, style. And this is going to be, like I said, an object where we're going to have CSS-like properties. What I do mean by CSS-like properties is, for example, you know, in CSS, we have a property, for example, that is called background color, and we can have it red, for example. This doesn't work here. How to make it work? You see that we have errors. The editor is saying, hey, this doesn't look good. And what we do is basically for every CSS property that has a hyphen here, we get rid of the hyphen. So it becomes background color. And the first letter after the hyphen, we need to capitalize it. So background color becomes background color with a capitalized C and no hyphen in the middle. That is true for anything else. For example, padding left will become padding left anything with a hyphen will go through the same process. If that is clear. So basically we can have here we can have, for example, what we'll call this is actually let's do this one step better and call this, for example, game. Let's call this container. Let's have an object with the container. This will be like the class in CSS, and this will be the properties. So basically this is a CSS, but in a JSON form. How we'll call it then is that we will come here, for example, in this div where we want to apply the style. And what we'll do is we'll go and have style as a property, and we'll give it style. Let's call it styles maybe here to make a difference. Styles dot styles, excuse me, dot container. This will give it these property, this object. And as we can see, if we save now and go back to our page, we'll see that the background did indeed become red. So that's a way we can write style directly in the JavaScript that has many uses. For example, we can have style that depends on variables. For example, we could have here a variable called use red, use, or call it maybe background color, and have it here be blue. And sorry, I can hear. Excuse me. Cause outside here, and we can have here have it depend on a variable. That's an advantage we have that we couldn't use in regular CSS, is that we can have the styles object that varies depending on variables. See, so we can send variables directly into our styling in a sense, which allows us to do really cool stuff. We can have different things. For example, we can have here, and let's not use the background color. Let's say background color. Let's have it. Let's have a border. For example, when something like the border, for example, is has spaces in the middle, you'll need to put it in a string like this. So one border, one pixel, and solid. You'll see that now we have a border. We'll go through, we'll add a number of, let's keep the background color for you guys so you can see it, look at it back later. Let's put it back, background color, and let's do something like light, it's like gray maybe, or light gray. Does that work? Light gray. Yeah, okay. We can have the light gray as a background. We can have this as maybe 2 pixels, and we can have a border radius of 50%. And we can have a margin of, let's say, 15 pixels. So there we go. We should now, oops, that's too much. Border radius of 5 pixels. 5 pixels. A bit more. 8 pixels. There we go. And maybe not a margin, but padding, I mean. And a margin of 15 pixels as well, of 10 pixels. That's it. Okay. So here we have it. As you can see, we're applying CSS without writing this to a CSS file. We're just adding here an object, which allows us to control basically all of this. And actually, we don't even have to put it inside the class. We can put it outside. We can put it outside the class like this. Or even better, we can take this and we can do it best way. You are using best practices is that we go here and add styles.js. And here we'd have export default generate styles. Which returns what we just did. Actually, that returns what we just did, and then we can just call it here. We can have our styles, and we call it from styles. So then we don't need this because it's not within our class. And it should work properly or not. What is the issue? Generate style is not defined. Okay, so this should be called generate styles. Sorry, and export default constant. Okay, we don't need to call it actually. We'll do it like this. And here we'll call it generate styles. All we need to do is here have const styles equal generate styles. And that should work perfectly and keep our code clean without polluting it with a lot of code. So we can get it all from different files we can see here in the game card. So we have the data, we have utility for rendering one game element, and we'll have styles, basically all of this in JavaScript. So this is the first way. This way we are not writing CSS files like at all. But we can definitely have the same functioning, but with regular CSS. Before going to that, maybe some of you are not clear as to why I made this a function. This would be a good question for those who maybe are not clear on that point. I declared it as a function because we can have here, for example, parameters. Why? Because the true advantage of having styles in JavaScript, like I said earlier, is having variables, right? So we can here, for example, have parameters.background.bg color. Okay, and what that does is that then when we call generate styles, we can give it an object with any parameter we want. For example, we can have here light gray, and it will keep on working because we can give it actually parameters to the generate styles, and that allows for very nice things because we don't have to edit size. We can reuse this container style wherever we want, and we can just update the color here. If I update it to red, if I convert it back to red, then it will be red, as you can see here. So let's keep it at light gray. So that's why I made it as a function and not directly as a JSON. So that's a cool way of handling styling in React by using CSS inside of our JavaScript. So just keep in mind that hyphens just disappear and use capital letters before the hyphens when using this method, please. So the second way we can use CSS, as we said, is basically through regular CSS files. We will go here and add another file called styles.css. And here we can write whatever we want. Let's do this. For example, we want everything to be under the game cards ID. So let's say anything with the game cards. And I want, for example, here, I want to style these. I want to style every one of these guys. So what I'll do is I'll go here to the utility. I see that I give them all the class name G card. So I want to style the G card, right? I'll go here and have the G card. So basically I want to style all of these on this class name. And what I'll do is I'll basically come here and maybe give them another background color. This time it's CSS, so I can write it normally. I'll say I wanted white. And I want a border here as well of how much did I put earlier, 2px. So I'll put another, or maybe I'll just not choose a border at all. And I will use a border radius actually to make it look nice. I'll use a border radius of 8 pixels. I won't need to use this because this is CSS. And now, if I go back here, I see nothing has changed. Because in HTML, if you remember, in HTML, we do this. Let me go on the browser to show you. So in CSS, usually we use CSS tag HTML. What we do is that we call it in this manner. Wait. Either we call it under this link. Maybe I'll zoom a bit. So what we do usually is that we call it like this. But in the React, we don't have to do this actually. We don't need to go in HTML and add a link tag. All we need to do, and that's thanks to the configuration made by the guys that create React app, because they use a Webpack configuration to do this. What they do is that you don't need this at all. And whenever you need to add CSS, like we do here, it is really cool. We can go into the component file. We go into here, and all we have to do is come here, add an import, and have it import styles.css.
Mr. Hazim.
Yes.
I think in Webpack, as I got a previous experience in front-end development that separates CSS and JS in the production phase, yes, and in the development phase, all CSS and JS stays in the same file. Is it like this in React?
Yes and no. Why yes and no? It actually runs, React does run Webpack in development and in production. I will show you. Here we are in development, right? But if we go into, let's see here. If we, let's see. Basically, what it does, it still uses Webpack, but it uses it differently. It hides it, right? It hides it. Create React app hides it, but what it does, it uses Webpack to build, but it does it different in a sense where it doesn't merge files, so it's easier in development. But it does Webpack in development for a few features, especially for the feature I've seen now, for example, where you can have the Webpack module called post CSS. I will show you. And let's go to post CSS Webpack, and you'll find that in Webpack you have this loader called post CSS Loader. And what that allows us to do, basically, I'll zoom in for those who understand Webpack. What it does, it allows us to call CSS into our JavaScript using import. Usually that doesn't work. If we were to use Webpack only in production, that means that basically what we're trying to do right now by importing styles in our JavaScript wouldn't work. So they still use Webpack in development builds, for a few features like CSS injection and JSON parsing. So yes, I agree. Webpack is usually used in production, but in this case, it's used in both. It's just a different configuration for production. Production, the Webpack configuration is totally different. They have two configurations, one for development and one for production. Does that answer your question? Is it clear?
تمام تمام.
Okay, good. So like I said, Webpack is being used here with the post CSS loader, but we don't have to worry about it. Like I said in the beginning, we are not configuring Webpack. The create React app tool does it for us with settings they pre-configured. So we don't have to worry about it. We can directly use these features. We can directly use post CSS without worrying about how we can configure post CSS with Webpack. So no complexity here. We don't have to worry about it. We can directly go into our code and import our styles directly in JavaScript. And what we'll see is that that's all we have to do. When you go back to the page, you see it has been taken into account. So we can see here we have the CSS showing correctly in our page. Okay. What we'll do now is that maybe we'll add some things. We'll go back to our styles.css here and we'll add some padding. Okay, to create some distance, and we'll create a margin as well of 10 pixels. And this should be it. What else can we do? Okay, what we can do here is maybe have, I don't know, maybe a shadow. We can add a shadow to it. How we are going to do it? We're going to use maybe box shadow. Oops. Let's go back here and let's use box shadow and see how it looks like. Box shadow, and maybe have it, I don't know, 5px by 5px. Okay, and that gave us shadow, but maybe we can make it. So yeah, there we go. It gave us a bit of a shadow. I'll change the margin a bit. I want it to be a bit bigger. I want it to be 20px and 10px horizontally. So that there, it definitely looks better. So as you saw here, what we did is that we added CSS through a CSS file. And we also added CSS as part of JavaScript to answer the earlier question that was asked earlier in the course. We need another example, not JSON file, but JSON from Ajax request. It's basically the same thing, but why would you get style from Ajax? I mean, it's the same thing fundamentally. You'll be getting a JSON, and I mean, what is the use case here? Would you have your styling on the server? That's what you mean? That's the question, Hussein? I mean, yeah, but basically it's going to give you the same results. It's going to give you JSON. We can fake it here. We can add here maybe services, and we can have styling API.js. And what we can have is basically we can have export function or export, I don't know, export async get styling, which is going to be an asynchronous function. What is your issue here? Oh, export const. Asynchronous, and what you would be doing. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm showing you right now. Let's say you have here a request, an Ajax request. And set timeout. Let's say this is your request and you'll be giving back after 2 seconds. You return request. I don't know, you give it the background color, which is going to be blue. And you take it here, for example, and this is, keep in mind, this is Ajax request response. Let's say here you have either Axios or Fetch run it from your server. Here I have no server to try with the question you asked, but let's say you get it here, not from a file. Let's say this is our Ajax request, and the response is going to be this. We can have here where okay, we can have here the generate styles. What we can do is that, for example, we can have we can have here, we can import it. We import what is it called? What did we call it? Styling API, get styling. We can have get styling here, and we can call it from services styling API. And what we can do with it is maybe we can have it asynchronous here, and we can go and have const styling params from Ajax or whatever, and we can have it be await get styling. And let's see what we get from here as a test. Whoops. The return method should have a return statement. Okay. So basically what we need to do here is have it outside of the render because it doesn't like synchronous. The thing is, I understand. I mean the data. Okay. I thought you were talking about the styling. I misunderstood. Okay. Basically, it's going to be the same thing. Let me call this games API, and we can have it. No, we can have it here. Get games, and it can return here all of the data. That's the thing. I didn't want to basically teach you this right now because we're gonna have to use states. But how you would do this is you would have, let's say this is your call. This is the function. Okay. This is your Ajax function. Like in the assignment by Mr. Safedi, you had here, if I'm not mistaken, axios.get, and you'd have URL to games. Let's say it's like this, and now I understand you better. And what we do here is, like, instead of this thing, let's say you get games, games API, and here we'd have get games. And what we'd have to do is basically do this. We'd have to state games array, and what we'd need to do is we'd go here and do components, did mount, and we'll have to go and basically call get games dot then games list, and we'll have to do this dot set state games list, and then we'd have to read here from this we don't need anymore, and this we don't need anymore. But then we need, instead of using games data here, we'd be using this. Let's actually copy it. Instead of using games data from the file, we'd be using this dot state dot games basically. And how that would work is, what is the issue? Get games is not a function. Why? Isn't not asynchronous? Yeah, it is asynchronous. Oh, okay. Let's say, okay. Is it returns? It's not a promise. Return promise. Resolve. Reject. And have it. If I'm not mistaken, this should be like this. This should be here, and this should be resolve. What did I forget? Oh, okay. This should be here. No, here. There we go. So let's create here a promise, and then now it should work. Get games then is not a function. Why? Oh, okay. I came here where we didn't execute the function. I'm sorry. So here, undefined is not a promise. What do you mean? 1 second. Let me check. Get games equal return. Why is it undefined here? Get games, services that get games. Let's see, console.log get games. Oh, okay, I forgot something here. It needs to be returned new promise. I'm sorry. It should be good. Okay. And resolve this. I forgot the array. Okay. See, now it's like you are getting it not from a file, but from an API. Basically, that's what you would do. But this uses two concepts that we haven't learned yet, which are the state and lifecycle methods. That's why I'd rather not use it now. I explained it to you, Hussein, but this is for a later chapter. But is that clear for you? Does that answer your question? It's clear, Hussein? Component did mount is not clear? Yes, I mean, that's what we are going to learn a bit later on the chapters. That's why I didn't want to go through this now, because we lack certain knowledge before we can do this. Basically, component did mount is a life cycle. It's what we call a life cycle method. And as you can see, a state as well is something we haven't learned. As you can see in the presentation, on the first schema of the course chapters, these are two things that are life cycle methods here. and state, that are two things that we are going to see tomorrow. Tomorrow we are going to learn about these things. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. I wanted to show you that it's possible right now, but we'll get into the details of this tomorrow. Okay?
Excuse me.
Yes.
I want to know more. Any idea? Come. I want to ask. I want to explain. To learn.
Of course.
Excuse me for my interruptions sometimes.
Please don't apologize. And I'd love for more people to interrupt me and ask questions. That way I know you are following and learning. So it's very important. Please keep asking questions. I'm happy to answer them.
I have a passion to learn React, and you are working well. And
Thank you.
I want to learn more and be professional in React and the front end.
Hopefully we will reach that level. We have today is going to be React, tomorrow, as well as next Saturday. So we're going to have 3 sessions of React, and hopefully we'll understand everything by the end of it.
Okay.
Okay?
Thanks, Mr. Hazan.
You're very welcome, and please keep asking questions. Okay?
Thanks.
I'm going to delete this if you don't mind, because to not confuse people when they come to read the code later on. So I'm going to delete this. Okay. Now we should be getting back to our earlier state, and let's get on with the course. Does anyone else have any questions before we go to the next step according CSS? Is it clear for everyone how we add CSS and styling to a React application?
It's clear. Go on.
Very good. Very good. Let's go to the next step as time is running. Let's get back to where we were. We were on inline styling. So now responsive design. There are a few actually important CSS properties that we are going to need to use a lot for responsive design. There are 3 categories of those CSS properties that we will be exploring today. The font relative sizes. We are used to using px basically to express size. So we say something is 5 pixels, 10 pixels, 15 pixels. It's really interesting to maybe express those sizes with EM and REM. What are those? EM is basically relative to the font size of the element. What does it mean? For example, let's say I go into a div, okay? And I say this div has a font size of 16. Now, let's say I want this div to be 32 pixels of width. Instead of writing 32 pixels, what I'm going to do is write 2EM. Why? Because 2 times 16 is 32. That's really useful when you, for example, you want to make responsive interfaces with changing font sizes. For example, if you want an input to always be able to hold, let's say, 10 characters, that input needs to be a width of 10 EM. And then you can change the font size however you want, and the input will change with it to be bigger or smaller, but to always hold 10 EM. We'll see it in practice after we go through the theory. There is also the REM, which is very good as well. It's like the EM, but doesn't take the font size of the element, but the font size of the root element. What does it mean? It means the font size of the body tag or the HTML tag. I'm sorry. If we go in the HTML tag in the CSS and we say basically the font size should be 16 everywhere in the HTML, then we can express everything else in terms of REM. For example, if you want the common font size to be 16, and then you want a specific part to be two times the default, you do 2 rem. That means you can have only one default and everything else changing with it. We'll see how that works in a minute. So another very important category of CSS properties, some of you already know them. We talked about them in the past. It's flex, which is a set of CSS properties that allows us to do a lot of things in terms of organizing our divs and our tables and in the HTML. So we'll have the flex direction, flex wrap, flex grow, flex shrink. We'll see some of them today. Another great CSS property is the @media, especially with the max width. What does it mean? It means basically that allows us to run specific CSS code for specific screen sizes. So basically we can have a CSS for big screens and another CSS for small screens. And we'll also explore this in a bit. So let's go back to our code and try these out. Okay, let's go back to our code. Let's explore what the rem is. First, we see that we have created React app created an index.css for us that contains basically some basic CSS for our app. What we're going to do is just we're going to come here and add HTML and have it have, for example, font size of 12 pixels. Okay, now you'll see a lot of things will become 12 pixels, but the interesting part is that now we have here in our game cards, we have H2 and we have H4, and we have titles and subtitles. What we can do, since here we have 12 pixels, what's really interesting is that we can come to our here the CSS of our game cards that we wrote right now, and we can come here and add some other stuff. We can have here G card and title, and we can say that the title, the font size of the title is 1.5 rem. That means basically what that means is how do we write comments? Okay, we can't write comments here, but basically what that would mean is that it was going to take 1.5 times what we wrote in the HTML tag, which is going to be 1.5 12 pixels, which will give us in turn basically 18 pixels of font size. I have MJ asking, how can I use Bootstrap in React? Well, there is actually a very easy way to do that. I mean, we're not going to explore it here in this course, but just for you, you can actually go to npm and install what we call React Bootstrap. I'll show you right now, MJ, and here you can see React Bootstrap. All you have to do is install it using npm, and all explanation is here. If you install it, you can then use class name and use classes from Bootstrap. That's all you need to do. There is a documentation here if you need it, but all you need to do is install React Bootstrap basically, and you're good to go.
Do you recommend this way or using CDN of Bootstrap?
I actually recommend it this way because it's better integrated with React's virtual DOM. And some older versions, I don't know, but latest versions, I don't use Bootstrap a lot. But in older versions, Bootstrap used jQuery as part of its feature spectrum, and jQuery is incompatible with React. So I recommend using this instead of using CDN with Bootstrap. Just use npm, install React Bootstrap, and you're good to go. And you'll be saving yourself a lot of headache and debugging some stuff that may not work properly. I hope that answers your question, MJ. And by the way, this is handled by Bootstrap's official team. So everything is fine. As you can see, there are 1 million weekly downloads of it, so it should be fine. Let's get back to what we were doing. And like I said, let's have the title here, 1.5 times bigger than our root font size, which means basically it's going to be 1.5 times the font size in the HTML, which means 16 pixels. Let's save it and come back here. I mean, then the difference may not be apparent, but let's put, for example, here 10 rem, and you'll see it's way bigger now. Basically, 10 rem means it's going to be 160 pixels, which is huge. So let's keep it at maybe 2 rem. That's fine. And let's have subtitles at title at maybe 1.5. And this should be working properly. Now, what if we want our cards now, the whole card, to be basically half of our screen's width? Another interesting property in CSS is this. Basically, we can have in the game card here, we can do width equals 40 VW. And what that does, VW, basically, it means 40% of total screen width. So basically, if you have a screen of, let's say, 1080 pixels, it's going to be 40% of that, so almost half. All right? That's a really interesting property as well for responsive design, because that actually adapts. Let's look. Now that is responsive, what does it mean? It's responsive. If I make it smaller, it gets smaller because it's always 40% of my screen. If I make it bigger, it gets bigger as well. See, it always follows the size of my screen here, which is really good. So now we talked about something else, which is EM. Let's explore that. What we could do as well, for example, here, let's have the title, font size EM, and let's have, I don't know, like you said, like you see here, let's have, instead of width being 40 VW, we can have it be, I don't know, let's say we can have it 20 EM. What that means is going to be 20 times the font size in that element. Basically, it means it's going to be able to hold 20 characters. If I put 40 EM, it's going to be able to hold 40 characters. But now, as you can see, when I make the screen smaller and bigger, that doesn't change. Except if I were to come here and be like, I want my font size to be 1 VW, which means my font size is always going to be 1% of my screen view. So as you can see here, now it's going to change because I'm changing my, let's get rid of this maybe, so you can see it. So you can see here, the font size is changing for subtitles. It's changing with the screen size because we chose to have the font size being 1 percent of the viewport. If we want it to be 2%, for example, we can have this like this, and 20 EM. As you can see, it's going to be different. It's going to be bigger, and it's going to get bigger as the screen gets bigger, because EM is basically the size of your font, and we're changing the font with the view width. Eunice asks percentage versus VW. Good, very good questions. What is the difference? Percentage takes the size of the parent. What does that mean? I'll show you in a second. Let's get rid of this and get back to 40 VM VW for it to be clear for you, Eunice. So Eunice, you see here, we're taking 40% of the screen, right? Let's say we do this. Excuse me, let's go back to our styles here and put the container. Let's say the width here, we want it to be 600 pixels, okay? What that will do is that it makes the parent 600 pixels, right? But that doesn't change the size of my card because it doesn't care the size of the parent. It takes 40% of the whole screen. If I were to change here, instead of using VW, I use percent, what it does, it's suddenly, it takes 40% of its parent and not the screen. So that's the difference between percentage and VW. Percentage is percentage of the parent. VW ignores the parent and takes the whole screen as a reference. It's basically a percentage of the whole screen and not a percentage of the parent. Is that clearer, Yunus? Okay, so let's bring things back to how they were and get rid of the width here. And let's get back to how it was. There is, you're very welcome. Please keep the questions coming. Another element that we can do, we see now that these are smaller. It's a waste of space that they are basically one on top of each other. And we're going to use Flex to have them as columns. So let's change our container here. I'm sorry, the container here. And we're going to add display. Actually, I'm not going to do it here because it's making things more complex, maybe. I'm going to, in the style.css, I'm going to go here and add something to this. I'm going to, okay. I'm going here to add another tag for game cards, which is basically our container. Game cards is the big thing in gray here, the parent. You are fast than Essam Shweli. I don't understand the I don't understand the joke, Tarek. I don't know if you're making fun of me or not, but
الشوالي معلق رياضي.
الشوالي. اوكي. عرفت وين معلق. Am I that fast? I thought I was going a bit slower. I'll try to slow down. I'm sorry, Tara. I hope it's still clear. I don't know if Shawel is clear, but I hope I am. It says that there is so much to learn and so little time. So I'm trying to be clear but fast so you can see everything, actually.
Because they are speaking French, they are fast.
Yeah. I mean, anyway, we have a lot of things to see and not a lot of time remaining in courses in the program. So that's why I'm trying to get you guys up to speed. But please, if I'm going too fast, please just tell me, can we slow down? And I'll spend more time on whatever you want me to spend time on. And please don't hesitate to always ask questions. It's a way to slow me down as well, so I'm not as fast. People should
The
ask
speed
questions.
English is not too fast, and we must be familiar with that.
Okay, so I'll try to slow down a bit for from now on. As we said here, we're going to use flex, so we need to add the display and add flex here. We need to give it the direction. If I go flex direction and I tell it to use columns, what it will do now is that we'll see row, maybe, must be mistaken. Yeah, we use row. And now, as you'll see, it is using, it's putting them side by side. I included a reference in our lesson plan that I'm going to share with you here, a guide to Flexbox, which is really useful when you're learning Flex. Basically, what we're doing here, Flex has a container, which is the parent that we set here, which has different items like we do. And oh, there is a lot of delay when you swap windows. Oh, okay. I'll try not to swap windows too much and wait after I swap then. What I was saying is that when we have a container and items, and the container is a flex container, like we did now, the flex direction is basically how we want to arrange its items. We used row, which basically means it's going to be this way. We can use row reverse, which puts them this way, and column, which puts them from top to bottom, and column reverse would put them from bottom to top, basically. So this is a very useful resource that I put in the presentation and that I suggest you guys read, because it uses images and it's very clear, and it allows you really to be way better with Flex with little time. So let's get back to our code, maybe. Excuse me. Okay. We see a problem here is that basically we have empty space here, empty space on the right. And that looks ugly, right? That's I don't like that. We want the space to be equally distributed so it looks pretty. So what we'll do here is that we can add another property here, which is called flex. Excuse me, it's going to be go flex, not flex, justify content. And we can use space around or space evenly. So the space is always equal. As you can see now, the spacing is the same. Space between, as Iman Ibrahim said, will do something different. Space evenly will put the same space everywhere. So basically, the space here on the left is the same as in the middle, as it's the same as on the right. Space between does things differently, where it does make the space between them bigger. As you can see, they are both pushed to the extreme, and the big all the space available is put in the middle. That's what space between does. There is also the reverse of space between, which is space around, that actually puts the space around them. And there is also, of course, center, which will just put everything in the middle and all the space on the sides. But here, for the purpose of this, let's use space evenly, so it's even, nice and even. By margin and padding. Yes, exactly. By margin. I mean, you still need margin and padding because you want at least some margin to exist. And we use padding to have the space here between the text and its parent. But yeah, we can definitely use a flex and get rid of margin and padding if you hate them so much. Why don't you like margin and padding, Mohd? You seem happy to get rid of those. Well, as said Mohad, by marginal padding, but we still have an issue that we need to figure out in the responsive design before we because of float left. Yeah, you're right. I hate float left as well. You're right, Mohad. Yes, Flex is better in that regard. So we are still missing one item in our design to make this 100% responsive to us, which is the fact that when we make it too small, it's just ugly. This is ugly. I mean, look at this. We don't want that on our mobile view. So what we'll do is that we add something very nice, which is the @media. So basically what we'll do is that we're going to add something called @media screen. I'll show you right now. That's the same as we can see here in the presentation. Oops, excuse me. On the presentation, I showed you here. So basically we use @media and we give it the max width of the screen that we want. And it allows us to have different, basically, basic styling for screens that are smaller or something. So let's go and do just that. Here, let's do @media screen and give it a max width of 640 pixels. What that means is that any screen smaller than 640 pixels will use this instead of its old styling. Yes, Iman, Ibrahim, that's what it means. It's called a media query for those who are not familiar with it. So here what we're going to do is that we're going to edit this. And we're going to take this and we're going to put it here. And now what we're going to do is that you see here, it uses 40 VW. It uses 40% of the screen. Let's say on smaller screens, we wanted to take 85%. Or let's give it 85% and see how it looks. Basically, we want it to be alone. So let's go back and make our screen smaller than 640. I mean, we're not there, and there we go. Let's make it important, maybe. Why is it not changing? What have I done wrong? Oh. It is taking it correctly, but why is it taking? Maybe we need to use flex wrap and have here flex wrap, which is going to, yes. So what flex wrap does, as you can see here, it doesn't work because I forgot flex wrap. What this does is basically, as you can see here, I will show you in the reference. The flex wrap allows items to go back to the line when they don't have enough space. They go back. If you don't use flex wrap, it doesn't go back to another row, let's say, unless you tell it to. Explicitly, if you go create another flex container. But if you want to put it all in one flex container, we need to use wrapping like we do here. So let's get back to flex wrap, and we should not be needing important. And there we go. So now when we go above 640 pixels, it takes two spots, two places, half of the screen, two halves. And if it goes too small, then it takes smaller. So maybe here, as we can see, we need to do it maybe at a bigger size. Let's do it at 77. Okay, let's do it here at 77 instead of 77 instead of 640, so it doesn't break like it does. So here we can see up, it goes like this, and then it goes one single size, and it's perfectly responsive. If we make it small like a phone, everything is fine. If we make it big like a laptop screen, it looks fine. Basically, these are the basics of responsive design. Well, you can go further with it thanks to the media queries, and you can do, I mean, you can do whatever you want with the media queries to make it responsive and look good on phones and on laptops. What I advise you to do is use this device toolbar in Google Chrome or Firefox. What that does, it allows you to see how it looks on certain, either in certain resolutions, or what's really interesting is that you can see how it looks on certain phones. For example, you can choose iPhone 6, 7, and 8 and see how it looks on iPhone, on an iPhone screen size. You can choose an iPad, for example. You can choose a Galaxy S5 and see how it looks on there. And it allows you to see basically how your website looks on different devices and see if it's perfectly responsive and looks perfectly good on all your users' devices and not only on their PC, basically. Is that clear for everyone? Do you have questions? We have a few minutes, so please tell me if you have questions or there is something that you want to see again before we finish. What is the time plan for the course divided into the topics that will be explained? Who will the coach be? Okay, the coach will be me, and it will be divided amongst 3 other sessions for React, 1 of today, 1 tomorrow, and 1 next Saturday. And then we'll have a last assignment for React. And basically, I see that for the last week's assignment, I have only got, that's what I wanted to talk about as well. I got only 2 results. I agreed with Mr. Safedi so he can do coaching on the assignment I gave you last week. So he can help you, and we're going to extend the deadline by another week. So for those of you who didn't send me, please send me this next week before next Saturday, so I can review your code. Because until now, I've only gotten 2 of your assignments. And like I said, I agreed with Mr. Safedi, he will be helping you with the assignment I gave you on site, starting next week. Tarek, yes, I will push the code on GitHub and put the link inside the presentation and give you the presentation link. I'll put the link here of the GitHub, and I will give you the presentation on both Discord and WhatsApp, so everyone can check the presentation and the code again. And I expect Isra will be sharing today's session's record. Okay, Mohd, we'll do that tomorrow morning before we start. We'll do a quick review of what we did today. I will do that. Please review what we did today by yourself tonight as well. So if you have questions about what we did today, you can ask me tomorrow before we start, okay? Everyone. We'll do a review and a quick question answer session. So you can ask me questions that you didn't ask me today. It is important that you ask questions. It doesn't matter if you ask them in English, in Arabic, however you want, but please ask questions until it's perfectly clear for all of you. Mahmoud Abed asked about Bootstrap. Okay, I will show you again. So basically, it's easy for Bootstrap. You just need to go and install using npm, use React Bootstrap. It is a library for integrating Bootstrap into React. You install it with npm, and then you use class names and it works, basically. That's it, Mahmoud. French, you can ask, Tara. Je parle très bien français aussi. You can even ask in Japanese if you want.
Merci beaucoup.
Je vous en prie. De rien. I speak Japanese as well. Nihongo hanasemasen. So yeah, you
ما
can ask
شاء
in whatever
الله
you
ما
want.
شاء الله.
Ask your questions. بس أسأل السؤالات.
كم لغة معك؟
شوي عربية. عربيتي ليست لست قوي جدا في العربية. عربيتي غريبة. وأتكلم تونسي يعني الدارجة، العربية الدارجة، اللغة التونسية. وأتكلم فرنسي، إنجليزي وياباني.
ياباني.
Yes.
يا مهارة كوشيدة.
Why didn't I come to Gaza? Well, first reason, I wasn't invited to Gaza, and second reason is that I have
Better not to do.
yeah, and second reason is that I have other missions here as well in Tunis, so I can't be away because I basically work the whole week on different subjects, and I have my own company here. But yeah, hopefully I'll come visit soon. I'll come visit you and you can show me your React skills and all the money you made from freelancing projects. Okay. So
Okay.
let's wrap up the lesson. You'll have everything, like I said, on WhatsApp and Discord. And I mean, that's it. If you have any questions before we leave, go ahead. Otherwise, we're done for the day and you can go rest and review what we've done.
Thank you, Mr. Han.
You are very welcome. For those of you who will still have trouble, you can also reach out to me directly on either WhatsApp or email, and we can schedule a one-on-one coaching session when I have some free time, and we can discuss one-on-one if you having troubles. I mean, that already happened with some of the students, but everyone is free to try and schedule a one-on-one coaching session with me. We'll agree on a time and we'll hop on a call and I'll try to explain everything to you directly. So don't hesitate to contact me directly if you need. Otherwise, Mr. Safedi will be doing coaching sessions on site as well, I believe. Now starting next week. So thank you guys for your time today, for being focused, for asking nice questions. And see you tomorrow. Have a great Saturday, have a great day, and have fun. Goodbye. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. I assume Sarah will be sending you the record anyway. So goodbye and see you tomorrow.